My nanny's troubles. I grew worried when I noticed that Linda, my nanny, seemed uneasy after I told her that she could take a day off. Upon her denial, I approached her and asked if everything was all right and if I could do anything to assist her, expressing my willingness to contact Grandpa for help if necessary. I tried to establish eye contact, grasping her hand in mine, but she avoided it and replied, "No, it's nothing, young miss." With that, she withdrew her hands and walked away into the kitchen. I had a feeling that things were not quite right. It made me want to put my detective skills to work and figure out what was causing Linda's sudden shift in behavior. I couldn't help but wonder if she was considering leaving. However, I decided to keep an open mind and explore other potential reasons for her change in demeanor. Linda has been my nanny since my parents died in that fire when I was 5. Grandpa hired her to care for me, and I had become attached to her over the years. That made me so sensitive to the thought of separating from her. I never wanted to see her get hurt either, because she meant like a mother to me. I closely observed her actions and mannerisms to comprehend her behavior better. It became clear that she avoided making eye contact with me, and her level of distress appeared to increase whenever I was in her presence. This caused me to feel uneasy as I became more concerned that she might leave me. As I dialed Grandpa's number, my heart was heavy with worry. I knew he was at work, and I only called during his work hours in case of an emergency. "Hi, sweetie pie. Is there a problem?" he answered with concern. I hesitated momentarily, then mustered up the courage to ask him the question weighing my mind. "Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask if you're going to fire Linda," I said, my voice laced with sadness. I hoped that if he were, he would change his mind. "No, I'm not," he replied calmly, and I could sense that he was trying to put me at ease. But his response only made me more worried. "Then, is she retiring from being my nanny?" I asked, trying to hold back tears. "Honey, Linda is neither getting fired nor retiring." "Who said that to you?" he asked, his tone full of concern. His words were a balm to my troubled heart, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "No one. I was just worried about her, that's it. Anyway, thanks, Grandpa. Love you. Bye." I disconnected the call after saying that. Thankfully, this was off my list. Now all I had to do was find out what worried her. With a relieved mind, I settled back into my bed. I feared she would leave, but it seemed I was mistaken. With that worry put to rest, my attention returned to observing her. The meal she prepared was exceptional, featuring all my favorite dishes. This was quite unusual, considering the strict diet I had been following due to my ongoing health issues. Typically, such a lavish feast would only be served on special occasions, such as my birthday or after achieving top grades in school. So, her doing this only made me assume the worst. "Excuse me, Linda, but I must ask, do you have cancer?" I inquired in a grave tone, locking my gaze with hers and causing her to appear bewildered. Typically, when individuals receive a cancer diagnosis or are faced with something similar, they exhibit similar behaviors, I added solemnly. Although my comment elicited a smile from Linda, her expression changed to mournful within a few seconds. Despite this, Linda tried to maintain her smile as if she didn't want to show it to me. "Please do not concern yourself, miss. I assure you that I am in perfect health." Despite her words, I remained unconvinced and concerned about her well-being. After I was done with dinner, I started to feel sleepy, so I went to bed earlier than usual, leaving more inquiries about Linda for the morning. While I was in my sleep, I started to feel suffocation, as if something heavy was covering my mouth. and as I opened my eyes, I felt someone trying to choke me with a pillow. I started struggling, kicking, punching in the air to get away, and just when I could get away from the suffocation of the pillow, I found myself fighting with a sniffling Linda, who was trying to suffocate me. My eyes widened in shock, and at the same time, I was horrified and was trying to get away from her grasp. "Forgive me, I love you, but they have my son." Tears fell rapidly from her eyes as she said that, but all I could think about was how her hands were trying to reach my throat. This wasn't the Linda I had known for years. My nanny was sweet and kind. This had to be someone else. Horrified by everything, I managed to kick her and run away from my room. I did manage to grab my phone before she could catch me. I locked myself in the guest bathroom, hoping she won't find me there, and called Grandpa, telling him everything. While my anxious nanny, who failed to finish me off, searched for me desperately, Grandpa rushed inside, leaving her even more nervous than she already was. He brought police with him, and she was arrested immediately. As they took her away, she kept screaming, "I didn't want to do this! They have my son!" I finally got out of the bathroom and hugged Grandpa with tear-filled eyes. Whatever the reason, I never expected her to be the one to betray me like this. I looked at him with questions about who would do that to me, but it seemed like Grandpa was wondering the same thing. Linda confessed that my aunt and her family conspired to kill me. They tried to persuade her to do that, but when she threatened to report them, they kidnapped Linda's 7-year-old son and started blackmailing her into killing me. She was so distressed because she didn't want to hurt me, but they left her with no choice. My grandpa wanted to make me the sole heir of everything my parents and he owned, which pissed my aunt off, who thought that her cocaine-addicted son was worthy of getting that instead of me. But since my breathing was a hurdle for her into manipulating Grandpa for handing them his assets, she planned to end me, thinking they would get the fortune for being the sole living relatives. Poor them. They have no idea what is coming for them because my grandpa was ruthless in making people's lives a living hell. After getting Aunt and her family arrested, Grandpa helped Linda meet her son again. I know I shouldn't blame my nanny for anything, but the trauma I received that night was so massive that I don't think I would ever be able not to blame her. I realized that no matter how much you love someone, you cannot put them above your kin.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
When I first read Martin Luther's quote, "The devil can so completely assume the human form when he wants to deceive us," I thought he was talking about the real one, Lucifer. Despite watching the news of crimes daily, I only realized this was about evil in humans when I experienced it myself. "Excuse me, sir, are you Aiden?" I gently tapped the man's shoulder, hoping he was not the person I sought. Despite sitting at the same table my date had specified, he looked nothing like the pictures I had seen. To my dismay, he responded, "Yes, I am, and you must be Aurora. You look even more stunning in person than in your photos." I struggled to conceal my disappointment, and he seemed to notice my reaction, but still chose to disregard it. After thanking him for the compliment, I hesitantly took my seat before the waiter came and handed us the menus. However, before I could even get a chance to look at the menu to decide what I wanted to eat, he ordered for me without even asking. Such behavior is something I despise. No matter if I'm out with friends, family, or a date, it puts me in a bad mood. Though I refrained from voicing my displeasure, I quietly sipped my water as I waited for the Greek salad that had been selected for me, all the while lamenting my decision to agree to this date. Out of the blue, he apologized and explained that the photos he sent me were actually of his friend. He revealed that he had only done so because of his insecurities. I met him on OkCupid a few days ago and have been chatting ever since. Initially, I was presented with a picture of a tall, muscular Latin man. However, upon meeting him in person, he appeared shorter than me and did not possess the Latin features I had expected. What put my mood off wasn't his looks or height, since my ex was also shorter than me, but the fact that he lied. At that moment, I felt deceived and apprehensive about the date. It felt fake to me, but I did not want to be impolite by leaving immediately, so I decided to finish the lunch, at least before I started ghosting him. As I was eating, he started asking me all these weird and awkward questions that were highly inappropriate. I told him I was uncomfortable answering them, but he took it lightly and started laughing as he said I was making a big deal out of nothing. I wasn't a fool not to notice all the red flags he kept dropping on me. It was becoming increasingly clear that things could escalate and become dangerous if I didn't remove myself from his company. After finishing the meal, I got up, saying, "Thanks for the meal. I'll be leaving now. It was a pleasure meeting you, though." He scrunched his forehead in confusion and unexpectedly grabbed my hand, uttering, "What are you doing? Our date is not over yet. You ought to come over to my place." I yanked my hand back in shock and horror. What's wrong with this man? We barely conversed enough for me to feel obligated to adhere to his request. I quickly invented an excuse, citing an urgent matter at home, and exited without causing a commotion. Despite my attempts to evade him, he persisted in his pursuit. He made another grab for me, but I managed to dodge him. As I continued walking away, he followed me, demanding I stop. I reiterated that I couldn't stay, but he responded with a barrage of insults. He accused me of being inexperienced in dating and insulted my appearance, insisting that I should feel grateful for the opportunity to be with him. Though I was tempted to retaliate with equally cutting remarks, I refrained from causing a scene and kept walking, determined to put as much distance between us as possible. He didn't stop following me. His footsteps grew louder and closer as he shouted that I would regret it if I didn't stop. I was highly disturbed and scared at this point, praying for him to give up. But suddenly, he shoved me roughly from behind before blocking my path. My heart was thumping so loud that I feared it would come through my throat. I wished for someone to notice us and come to my rescue, but people kept walking by without paying attention. His gaze swept from my forehead to my toes as he scrutinized me. Suddenly, he burst out laughing and remarked, "You look like you're about to cry." His demeanor gave off a disturbing vibe, and he leaned toward my ear to whisper what he wanted to do to me. He told me that this was nothing in comparison to how much I would cry even more by the time he was done with me. I shot panicked glances at the people walking, but it was useless. As he was about to say something else, adrenaline rushed through my veins as I gathered the courage to kick him in his groin and run toward the station without looking back. Tears started flowing through my eyes as my legs sped up and reached the station. I hadn't eaten or drunk anything since morning and was on the urge to faint when someone grabbed me, which made me jump in fear that it was Aiden again. Instead, it was a middle-aged woman asking me if I was okay. My swollen, tear-filled eyes, red and sniffling nose, and disheveled look didn't let me say anything, and she started patting me on the head, saying everything was fine. She led me to the nearest cubicle, and I sat there for about half an hour shaking, and the woman just stayed beside me to ensure I was okay. When I realized I was wailing in front of a stranger, I immediately apologized for wasting her time. "It's okay. You don't have to apologize. It's not your fault. I was the one who chose to help you," she said politely as she flashed me with an angelic smile. I thanked her before heading inside and taking the metro to my place. I deleted Aiden, and my WhatsApp chat, blocked his number, and deleted all the dating apps from my phone. I spent days locked up inside my apartment, fearing he would find my place and come for me. However, it's a relief that nothing of such sort happened. I didn't meet anyone for days and started avoiding blind dates or meeting alone with strangers. This happened years ago, and to this day, it's the worst first date experience I have ever had. My friends still try to set me up with people for being single for this long, but I turn each one down. While she did not meet me when Aiden threatened me, that woman who offered me solace and water still felt like an angel. She dropped whatever she was doing, whether urgent or not, and made sure I was okay, unlike those who saw me in danger and still chose to ignore me. People like her are rare these days, and I pray they don't get extinct, because it would be the end of humanity then.
If I said to you, Madeline, Colombia, what do you think of? Pre-2015, only a handful of people would have given the answer that is commonplace today. But since that narco show was on TV, almost everyone knows what Madeline is famous for. And that's for being the home of the Madeline cartel, added up by the one and only Pablo Escobar. These days, the Madeline cartel are confined to the history books, but the legacy of violence lives on in the city, and the problems didn't exactly die along with Escobar when the law caught up with him in '93. So it's there, in the city of Madeline, that I met a girl named Stephanie while I was traveling around South America. Steph was from Canada on a similar sort of rolling vacation as I was, and there was this almost instant chemistry between us that ended with me asking her out. We drank cheap Colombian beers, compared traveling tattoos. She definitely won with her traditional tippy-tap Filipino tribal piece, and generally just had ourselves a great time. But when it came to the end of the night, we were put in a rather precarious situation. You see, that old legacy of violence and suspicion means that in a city like Madeline, you can't get anywhere without the right credentials. And as a result, neither of us were allowed any guests in our respective hostels. So we thought on our feet and decided the night was warm enough for us to spend it in one of Madeline's public parks. So we spot what seemed like a nice enough place to lay down. Only as we're walking over, we see these 4 Colombian guys hanging out on a bench. No reason to be suspicious, right? I mean, it was a nice enough night, and the South American idea of a late night is totally different to ours, so not everyone hanging out past midnight is some kind of reprobate. I suppose that goes for the States too, but I digress. So me and Steph are sitting there for a few minutes when one of the guys from the bench comes over to talk to us. My Spanish is still an embarrassingly dire at that time, but I knew enough to know that he was asking for a cigarette. I told him, I don't smoke. No fumo, lo siento. But he carried on asking for stuff like money, then other things with words I didn't understand. I kept saying, lo siento, tengo nada. But he just won't give it up. He kept talking to us, then spits out something mean-sounding in Steph's direction. So at that point, I really take issue, and I have enough Dutch courage to tell him to get F before I leave Steph off to another spot further away from them. I'll spare you the finer details of what followed, but needless to say, Steph and I ended up having a little cuddle, shall we say, until we heard and saw something that almost scared us half to death. A police siren and flashing lights, and it was just a few feet away near the boundary of the parkland. Steph quickly pulled her dress back on, and we attempted to make ourselves as presentable as possible as the cop car screeches to a halt. 2 guys jump out, and they come jogging over to us. How they knew we were there, I don't know, but I figured the guy asking for smokes had called them and has a kind of screw you for not being generous to us. I'm on the verge of a full-on freakout, as all I can think is, I'm gonna end up in a Colombian jail, and that's gonna be the end of it for me. Colombia has some of the worst prisons in all of South America, and to no offense to our Latin cousins, but that's really saying something. What's worse, I didn't have the money to pay a fine or a bribe, so there was absolutely zero chance of me talking my way out of it. But still, I didn't really have a choice. The best I could hope for was to pull off a speech skill 100. So I got down to it. As this little Colombian cop, I don't even say that to be mean, the guy was literally no smaller than 5'4", is shining his flashlight in my face. I'm just pouring this stream of bilingual apologetic consciousness that probably sounded something like, "Dude, lo siento, seriously, no borrachos, han cansado, just tired, I'm sorry, I swear to God." What all the cop does is scold us in Spanish, talking so fast that I can barely understand a word. Steph is like welling up with tears at this point, as she's too obviously thinks she's about to be arrested. All I could do was shut up and let the cop burn off whatever angry energy he had, and just pray he didn't drag us both off to jail there and then. I just hit him with, "Lo siento, no entiendo," until he finally kinda calms down and pulls a smartphone out of his police vest thing. When I see he's pulling up Google Translate, I know something isn't quite right. If he really was just going to throw the cuffs on us, he'd have done it already, right? So what are we about to type out? I'd never forget what came next and how I foolishly tried to anticipate his words without stopping to consider the context. First thing he typed was translated, "These men," and pointed over to where the cigarette guy and his friends had been. I look over expecting to see them looking all smug, but there's no one there. And it dawns on me that they'd beat feet as soon as they'd seen the cops arrive. I go to say something like, "Yeah, I know, they called you, I'm sorry." But the cop cuts me off with a little sock puppet hand gesture, clamping the thing's mouth shut as if to stay quiet. So I do as I'm told and carry on watching him type. "These men," he continued, "are very dangerous. You must leave now or they will come back." And the cop stopped for a second, like he was trying to find the right words, then wrote, "They will come back and violate the girl. Understand?" My chin is dusting the floor at this point. Like I had no idea we were in that much danger. And right before I can say anything, the guy types, "They are known to us. They have done things before. They will do things again." Again, we just nod, too stunned by how dumb we'd been to really be relieved that we weren't in any trouble. The cop then types out, "Don't come back here during the night again," shows us the message, then escorts us to the well-lit street nearby. As you can imagine, that whole thing really killed the mood, and even though I walked Steph back to her hostel, there was never any talk of me getting inside to continue where we left off. I saw her a few more times before she moved on to Argentina, and yes, we did conclude some of the unfinished business, even kept in touch for a while after I returned to the US. But you can bet your bottom dollar I didn't go anywhere near any poorly lit places in Madeline, not for the remainder of my stay. I learned my lesson, and I learned it good.
These are two accounts of the most scared I have ever been. Both happened while I was stationed in Afghanistan. The first happened in late 2011 in a place called Helmand Province, Afghanistan. I was standing posts on a small 8-man patrol base at about 2 a.m. in the morning. The posts consisted of 4 plywood walls, bulletproof glass, and multiple sandbags. I have been up for about 24 hours at this point and was starting to hallucinate through my NVGs. Mildly seeing school buses and the like, when all of a sudden, bang. I first thought it was a round, hitting the bulletproof glass. I realized about a second later that it was a rock. Immediately on high alert, adrenaline flowing, I scan the area with my thermals and get no heat signatures from anywhere. The strange part was that we had double-stacked razor wire about 30 meters out from the post, and it was all open ground for about 30 meters past that. so any rock thrown would have had to have been amazing. I caught up to the center of command and had them use a big thermal camera on a stick to scan the area in case I missed something. They got nothing. At this point, I'm kind of freaking out, thinking that there's someone out there that I can't see, but they can see me. 10 or 15 minutes go by, and I'm starting to relax a little bit, thinking maybe a bird flew into the glass or something like that. When all of a sudden, bang. Now this time, it sounded 2 times louder. I get a feeling of pure terror and feel adrenaline flush through my whole body. I've got my rifle at the ready, PEQ laser on, looking harder than I've ever looked before, every piece of micro-terrain that a human could be hiding behind. And still, I couldn't see anything. I freaked out, but nothing happens for the rest of the post. I still do not know to this day what it was, but it scared the life out of me. I'm thinking it might have been some form of hallucination, but it felt way too real. I know that probably doesn't make sense, but it just kind of didn't feel like something my brain was making up. Now, the second story happened in early 2012. We were still in Helmand province, but a different, bigger patrol base. 13 men plus Afghan National Army platoon. It was around midnight on this post. The patrol base had gravel lining the whole grounds to keep dust down. It was a poorly built defensive position with blind spots everywhere. I was a little over 6 hours into an 8-hour shift when I heard some gravel crunching just below my post, which is about 10 feet back from inside the wire, i.e. the blind spot. Very unusual because we had an early A in patrol, and everyone but myself, the other post standard, and the one guy on radio watching the command center were sleeping. I call out, "Who's that?" And the crunching stops, and I get no response. I use my radio to call the command center and ask if he was walking about. He tells me no, so I asked him to come check this out, and make sure to tell him to be careful coming around the corner, and have him keep his rifle up, weapon light on, and pop the corner. As I see him walking out of the COC, the gravel crunching sounds pick up again. But this time, rapidly, like someone was running. Once again, high alert adrenaline flowing hardcore. I'm thinking we've got someone inside the wires, so I start yelling stop or I'll shoot in Afghan. The sound stops, and my radial watch pops the corner, ready to shoot, and nothing. There was just nothing there. So, once again, I freaked out. He chalks it up to me being paranoid and lacking sleep, but I'm not so sure. About an hour later, it happens again almost exactly the same way, with nothing being there once more. I have the radio watch and wake up my buddy, and he stands on post with me for the last hour, which passes without incident. I still have no clue what it was. Was it a kid inside the wire somehow? A cat? A dog? A ghost? Who knows? All I know is I have never been more scared than I was during those 2 incidents.